Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Talking Cryptocurrency podcast. I'm your host, Jason Rigden. On this episode of the show, we're talking to Brent Cameron of FighterCoin. They're enabling fighters who are up and coming to receive direct funding from supporters. They're doing this with cryptocurrency and the blockchain. Brent was an awesome guest. It's really great to talk with someone with so much enthusiasm and positivity. You're really going to love this interview. But first, I've got this quick message. Hello, if you like this episode and you want to hear more like it, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll get every single episode. The Talking Cryptocurrency podcast is available on all podcast clients. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. And if podcasts aren't your thing, I publish video versions of these interviews on YouTube and DTube, so you can subscribe there too. All the links to all that stuff is going to be in the show notes. So please, if you want to hear more of this show, subscribe. Hello, on this episode, I'm here with Brent Cameron of FighterCoin. How are you today?
I'm good, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So could you tell me a little bit about this problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so FighterCoin, basically we're trying to change the way that fighters are treated in their contract negotiations. We're trying to put power back in the hands of the fighters. That's our primary objective because I'll give you a little background on myself. I'm a 42-year-old, fought once, coached jiu-jitsu about 5 years, been doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu from, my nickname's Animal, been doing that, got that name from Ralph Gracie in 2000. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu since around 1999. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because FighterCoin, I was brought onto this project by one of the founders, and so I'm a founder. I brought this project from its infancy to where we're at now, along with 3 other people. Now we have another advisor, so there's 5 of us now. But I was brought on because fighters it's hard to make a living. It's very, very difficult to make a living in fighting. If you're listening to this and you're a fighter, then even if you do sign with the UFC, you're like just hoping to get a fight so you can break 6 figures, right? And then that doesn't include that 6 figures that you make, doesn't include the coaching fees, the management fees, the travel. I mean, they're paying for travel now, but like that's pretty new as of recently. But if you're trying to come up the ranks, you got to pay for medicals, you got to pay for rent, your house rent. If you have a family, heaven forbid, man, that's a tough one. And so I know a lot of fighters, and I was just talking to one of my buddies, Bristol Murundi, who's a very well-known fighter, fought in the UFC, fought Jacare years ago. He's legit UFC guy, total awesome dude, awesome fighter. But we were talking about it, and he's like, these young fighters are so uneducated because they think they're just going to fight and that's it. That's their living. Again, sorry for tangent, Jason. I'm just kind of give some backstory of why we're doing this. But and Bristol and I are talking about this, and I know because Bristol we were training together in like early 2000s, and he basically was broke for a long, long time. I decided to open a personal training business because I was tired of being broke, and I was in Seattle, actually, where you're at, Jason, training at AMC when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't train 2 to 3 times a day, jiu-jitsu twice, lift weights once, and try to get a fight. And back then they were getting paid amateurs, so you don't get paid, but even if you got pro, you're getting 100, maybe 500. That's for show and win money. So one of the guys who came up with the concept of FighterCoin contacted me, and we've been building this ever since. He kind of had a rough idea about it, but I've shepherded this thing along from the fighter advocacy position, which is my title for FighterCoin. And right now, again, apologies, we've got a lot of really amazing stuff happening, and I hope this explains what we're doing. But we're in talks with we got 2 TV shows we're talking to. I can't disclose that right now. We've got some tournament stuff, and I'll explain that too, that we're going to be working on. But you asked, my question is, what's the problem we're solving? Fighters are broke, even the pro. People think like if you're a crypto person and you don't know anything about fighting, and you know a pro fighter, if you know them, the chances are they're working a full-time job. So, and training. So that's the problem. There's a couple of things. We're going to help them get paid, but they're literally going to get free money. I know that sounds weird. There's no contractual obligations. I've been in this game long enough to know, for instance, the UFC owns your likeness. Oh, so wow. That means Yeah. So that means that your podcast, Jason, if they wanted to distribute it, they could distribute your voice, you could distribute your image, all of that if you signed with the UFC for podcasting, whatever, and you would have no money coming from that.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about it, and our team is too. And we've, like I said, we're just starting to get some traction with some really heavy hitters that I can't disclose right now. But we're basically going to be the cryptocurrency for all MMA and contact sports.
Awesome. So how are you solving this problem? It sounds like a pretty terrible problem for these fighters to have.
Yeah. So we have it in the white paper. We've got our business objectives. So basically, when a fighter signs up, they sign up they have to be a professional. That's a distinguishing factor too, because of all the regulations. The regulating bodies dictate that no amateur can take money directly. But what in the game, what a lot of guys do is they're amateurs. They'll sell tickets. So they'll sell tickets to their amateur fight, and then they'll get a percentage of those tickets. So they're making some money, but it's nothing, right? As an amateur, right? But if you're a pro, I mean, you're making. I'll explain. Show win. Show money is just to show up and fight, and you lose. Win is show up and fight and win. So there's there's two forms of money. So it's usually 500, 500. Or there's a lot of times it's 200, 200, right? Or you get into the UFC. I think their minimum right now is 10, 10. Right. So if you win, you get 20,000. If you show and lose, you get 10. I think went up from 8 to 10. I can't remember exactly. So our job at FighterCoin is once a fighter signs up with us, they're going to get essentially free money. Now we're going to have some things there's no contracts, but they're going to have to be active in the sport of MMA. We can't have a guy that's a pro, fights once a year and gets, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 from us. I mean, they've got to be an active fighter. And we're also going to be giving money to coaches too. And that's a whole nother world. Because the coaches they're the guys that travel around the world with the fighters, and they're spending their lives doing it as well. And they're not getting, if a fighter makes it big, they make it big, but the coaches don't make it nearly as big, So yeah, that's how we're going to be solving that problem for the fighters. We're going to be giving them money. And your follow-up question is probably how are we going to be able to do that? So there's 3 ways we're going to do it. We're going to be using it off of. I got an install update on what we're talking on right now. Yeah, I think it's Zencast. But advertising. So we're going to advertise on the app. Now this is an area that one of the founders, the gentleman I was speaking about, Jackson, he is the marketer of the group, and he is a genius at it. He's been doing it for years, and so he has all the connections. He has all that information. What we're going to do is it's a very niche market, obviously. So we're going to sell advertising spots, or we've discussed this. We're not sure if we're going to go with this, but it could be a paid app. Doubt that's going to happen, but we're going to have sponsorships, and it's not going to be annoying. Jackson will handle all of that stuff. Merchandise. So I'm talking to one of the guys in Europe right now, in the Netherlands, about this specific thing, and he was asking me. He's like, "Can our fighters bring our own merchandise in?" And we were like, "Yeah, of course." And you're like, "Why wouldn't they just sell it themselves?" Right? That's probably a question that comes up. It comes up in my mind. Why wouldn't a fighter just sell it themselves? Well, 2 things. Fighters are fighters. Fighters are not marketers. That's number one. I'm a marketer. I am nothing or nowhere near 2 of the guys on our team in terms of marketer. One guy's a Wharton Business School guy, teaches over at MIT. One of the guys is Jackson. The guy is he's doing marketing for years and does very well. So my thing is, I'm an old school fighter. I call it skull cracking. That's what I've been doing forever. And so I'm not nearly as good. So these fighters hopefully they have brilliant coaches that are selling their merch and stuff, but that's very rare. So we'll make some money off the merch. Again, we're not in this to get rich. We're in this to really change and help the community of MMA. Like we want to transform it. Now, when I say the merchandise, what happens is the fighters, even if they have their own merchandise, they can sell it through our portal, and we'll take a very small percentage of that. But they'll have then this goes to the whole point of FighterCoin. Mm-hmm. This is another problem that it's solving, is fighters the relationship they build. And if you know anything about the MMA game, UFC has been pushing like Twitter, Instagram a little bit, but they'll tell this is what you should do to build your Twitter following so that you can connect with your fans more. Right. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to create a symbiotic, or not symbiotic, but a relationship, a more intimate relationship. That's not a real good word in MMA, but you're trying to create a better relationship with the fan and the fighter, right? And that's what FighterCoin is going to do, because that's where their money is going to be at. The fighters will be getting paid for this, so they're going to. The more people they have that pick them as their fighter, their nominated fighter. So every fan gets to pick one fighter. They can also have other fighters too, but they're going to have one main fighter. So the more people, if you're a fighter, let's say you're in Bellator, and you have like 5,000 people that pick you as a nominated fighter. Well, that's 5,000 people you can sell merch to like that. And here's the thing with merch. Again, this is the MMA game. Camps. I mean, I don't know of anybody that has connections enough. I mean, maybe Twitter, but there's not a portal to do this on Twitter, right? So you can say, hey, I'm selling my camp. So basically, guys will do like a 8 to 12 week, maybe 24 week camp prepping for a fight. Well, there's merch opportunity all day long there. Like you could be like camp, the last fight with, Cormier Lesnar that's coming up, the camp for that. And you can get guys buying those shirts. I'd buy that shirt, but there's no direct route for that. There's nothing out there for that, for the merch, because there's no direct relationship established. I mean, there's forums, there's underground. I mean, SureDog's got a bunch of stuff, but there's no, right. And sorry, I'm talking a bunch on this. Jason, am I kind of rambling here?
No, it's fascinating. It's really great. That idea of making your fans more passionate, really cultivating them and growing them. And it's something very hard to do. And if you can give fighters an opportunity to do that more easily, because that's not what they're doing, right? They're fighters.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And there's another thing too. The transactions, the UFC, FGC FighterCoin will be getting a small transaction revenue, very small percentage of the transactions of all the fighter coins going through. So we're going to have the money to pay the fighters. That's our thing. And sponsorships too. We're also going to have sponsorships. So we've got like transaction revenue, partnership with sponsors, merchandise, and advertisers. We've got a 4-prong approach to getting money to pay the fighters.
So what made you decide to use the blockchain technology for this?
So, I mean, it's a future. We've got our team is comprised of 2 brilliant tech guys. So one of the guys I was talking about, the MIT guy and Wharton guy, what he's doing, and I believe he does symposium or something at MIT. I'm not sure exactly how he's involved with MIT, but he's Wharton School, I believe. He has his own business. He's got several businesses. He's written several books on coding and all this stuff. And in terms of how that would be most beneficial, basically it's private. It's cryptocurrency. It's a completely different way to exchange money, right? So we stay away from fiat. So we're not controlled by from some central bank system. That's why blockchain for what we're doing for FighterCoin. I mean, the UFC is bound by the U.S. dollar, right, and the Federal Reserve and all that. And I don't want any of that garbage. So that's basically why. I mean, there's a lot more tech to that answer. There's a ton more tech, and you can see in our white paper the process flow and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And I'm not the tech guy, but for the tech guys out there listening, just message me, at animal@fightercoin.io. If you email me, animal@fightercoin.io, I will give you all of the information you want and need because I'll talk to our team and send out all the specs that you need on that one. So, yeah. Oh, and real quick, Jason, back to the fans, the relationship. So what's going to incentivize the fans to do this? That's another question that pops up all the time. Why would a fan go to FighterCoin? Okay. So we've created, so there's basically ESPN streak. So it's not gambling, but what you do is you pick winners for fights. And at the end of every every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you win prizes for the fights. So we've got to figure that end out too, because it depends on the more users we have, the more prizes we'll be able to give out. But it's UFC Pick'em, which is MMA fantasy. That's the easiest way of describing it. So like fantasy football, right? So UFC Pick'em just went out of business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly from the website, and I've got the screenshot of it, what the exact statement on their website when they said they went out, I think they said they had hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, but I think I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands of people that are now looking for a portal for something that will facilitate MMA fantasy. And that's what it is. That's what FighterCoin is. Yeah. So we've got the MMA. So fighter. So you're thinking, if you're a fan, I'm a fan of fighting. I mean, I got a ton of favorite fighters. Picking one would be hard. So I'd pick one as my nominated fighter, but you could switch your nominated fighter too. So like one quarter, I could do this fighter or whatever. But let's say I pick Bristol. He's not fighting right now, but let's say I picked Bristol when he was competing, and I was like, and he got on a card, and I was like, man, I'm more excited about this card now because he's on it. Well, I'm going to pick winners or losers of all those other cards, and then I'm going to see if I win a streak. So if I win out of the 12 or 10 or 8 now, 10, 12, 13 fights, then all the way top to bottom for prelims, all that way up. If I pick those and I win, if I get a couple of those, and I'm going to win some prizes. So it makes it fun, but they're going to do it anyway. It's going to be a fantasy game. So they're going to, the fans are going to be connected to and they're going to be able to put real money, transfer fiat into FighterCoin into their winnings. So here's the really interesting thing. When a fighter wins, the fan just won, their nominated fighter won, well, they're going to win a prize or whatever. And they're like, hey, and they're going to, I'm guarantee this will happen, will give some of their money, not money because they're not going to get direct money, but they'll give some of their fighter coins, extra ones, or however much they want to the fighter just because they can. And this opens up the whole realm for, so there's locker room bonuses and all this kind of stuff in the MMA world. Basically, if you're a fighter, there's different ways to make money, meaning that if you have an after party, you get, like Chuck Liddell used to do these, they're huge ones, and I'm sure they do it now. I'm older, so I remember those big time. But the after party, you go to the after party. Well, Chuck Liddell gets like $100,000 to have an after party at the biggest nightclub in UFC after his fight. He doesn't have to show up because if he's injured in hospital, then he's not showing up, right? But he gets $100,000 to promote it. There's all these different things that FighterCoin could be a part of or whatever, all not gambling, all legal, all above board. We're not really hitting the U.S. market at first because all of the fighters that we're going to be after are going to be contractually obligated to the UFC. And I don't know how bad when I say bad, well, I don't know how bad Bellator contracts are in terms of what the fighters can do and how much freedom they have. But if it's anything like UFC, these guys cannot work with us until they're out of that. So we're going to be so FighterCoin is going to grow as the MMA community grows. Like the lower tier fighters, when I say lower tier, they're not lower tier, but they're starting in the lower ranks, right? So you got the old, I don't know if Ring of Fire is still around, or I'm old. I'm talking to a bunch of different places, but Tough Enough, they're amateur mostly, but those guys, Tough Enough, that organization, Ronda Rousey fought on their card like twice, stuff like that. So
seems like they'd really be able to make those rabid fans by having them be there when the fighter was kind of young and really feeling like they had a hand in helping.
Exactly. That's exactly. So we're a long-term project, right? We're not in this to get rich. There's a ton of people. We talked about this before the call. I have a real problem with a lot of people doing ICOs nowadays because a lot of them are just scams and they're just like, I want to make million and then just out. We realize here's another thing too. The reality of the situation is as FighterCoin starts, we're not going to be able to give $5,000, $10,000 a month paychecks to registered fighters because we're not going to have the income yet. We're going to have to grow that, right? So if you're a Latin America, we're going to be big in Latin America, and I'm in the process now of talking to Asia, Europe. It's mostly probably going to be Eastern Europe because probably the contract's going to be pretty bad. But also it's going to be harder if you're a fighter out of Bern, with Switzerland, wherever, one of those really awesome cities there that I haven't been to. But I love mountains. But if you're in Bern or Paris, it's going to be harder for us to give you enough money for the first 6 months or 12 months, unless FighterCoin just blows up and we're have a bunch of money. So if you're in Latin America and you're in Colombia, you get $750 a month. I know I live in Vietnam. I'm an American. I'm from Dallas, Texas, Grapevine, Texas, actually. But you can. I know fighters here that live on $400 a month.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the cost of living is lower, you can afford to do so much more.
Absolutely. And then this is what's really fascinating. If you're a fan of the MMA world or know anything about it, now again, there's so much stuff happening. I don't know all of it at all, but I do know that in our Latin America, TriStar Jim in Puerto Rico is one of our advisors, and Juan would be able to speak much more intelligent to this because he obviously speaks Spanish and stuff. But Combates, I speak Spanish very badly. Combates Americanas, I think, is the name of it. But they just signed a deal with Bellator, and if I remember correctly, it's $1 billion deal. And so basically what's happened is the U.S. market it's where all the money's at now, but mark my words, these other places, they're going to experience the growth. Latin America, Africa as well, right? Africa, Latin America, Asia, they're going to experience growth. This is a strategy concept. It's a strategy. It's a game long term, right? They're going to experience growth like the UFC experienced growth in the last 10 years, and now it's their turn. And we're going to be part of that.
So have there been any challenges in trying to pitch this idea to the fighters?
Yeah. Well, you said it, right? We're fighters. I mean, we're not. I've talked to some brilliant promoters, and I mean, these guys do some amazing things. And I'm seeing a lot of promoters because they have a lot of connections, right? And they're like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. Yeah, sure. And I've talked to a bunch of fighters, and they're like, yeah, great. I've got Sean Madden, one of the greatest coaches in the UFC, as far as I'm concerned. He's under strength trainer under Dwayne Ludwig, and he's flying all around the world coaching his fighters out of Denver, and he loves it. He's just really busy, and he gets it. He gets it, and he's a coach. But you talk to the fighters like, yeah, but they're focused on fighting. So I'm now in talks with, like I said, a few different organizations. I mean, I just got off the phone today with Straight Blast Jim. No. I did not talk to John Kavanaugh. I think that's how you pronounce his name, the owner of that gym. But I talked to a guy that's representing a couple fighters there. And I shouldn't give names out until we talk more about this. But it was like, yeah, but they're crypto people, right? The manager and the fighter that I'm talking to, there's two of them. The fighter that's managed by the manager, they understand cryptocurrency, and they understand that there's this whole new world of not being tied to some central system that we can utilize, and we have freedom, right? And we can actually have a currency, quote unquote, a currency, like not fiat, but that will be within the MMA community, combat sports as well. So, yeah.
And on the fighter side, they don't have to really do anything technically, right? It's mostly a service.
They have to know nothing about it. Now, here's the thing. We're going to have press kits for them. So the more it's all on them, right? I mean, if you have 500 people signed up that nominated you as a fighter, then you're going to get more money every month because we're going to give you money. FighterCoin is, but then you're also going to get your fans that are going to give you money. Guaranteed. I would. I'm a fan. I mean, I'd do it. Heck yeah. So they're incentivized to grow FighterCoin and their image and their presence there because it benefits them directly. So, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like if one fighter sees another fighter doing this, and they're like, oh, well, I want to get in on that. Like, how come I haven't heard about this?
Yeah, absolutely. We are at the infancy. Like, our pre-sale is August 15th, and the people I've talked to that understand this world and they understand the potential are like, wow. That's to say, we're in talks right now with being on 2 television shows. And I can't talk too much about exactly how that's going to work, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to be able to allow the fighters to get money by having their FighterCoin addresses. Now, I don't know if that's going to go through. Well, it depends because it's a lot of legalities involved with that. So, but that's the talks that we're in right now, or at least what I'm proposing, and what I'm hearing back from the guys is like, yeah, that sounds like a really great idea. So these fighters that go on TV that have all the exposure, because if you go to a guy that's in the UFC and he's like, he gets points. Let's say he gets like, I don't know, 1 point, 2 point, 3 points, whatever, off of the total pay-per-view package. That's dependent on the promotion. That depends on how much promotion wants to give them. That depends on how much the promotion sells, like how much they market it, whatever. Like Mighty Mouse does his points. I'm sure he gets a lot of points, but his don't sell nearly as high as like Conor McGregor, because Conor does all his own marketing. Basically, I mean, UFC now, but he did all his own marketing all the way up. So my thing is with FighterCoin is what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to even the playing field. So they have all that fan base built up, right? Anyway, I'm kind of digressing because I'm tracking off of basically what we're going to do is we're going to allow fighters to be able to get paid through quote unquote tips by people while they're on TV.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That changes the whole game.
So what other plans do you have for the future? You got the pre-sale coming up soon. And I imagine you're going to have like a prototype rolling out soon, or is that still further out?
Oh, yeah, we actually have a demo right
cool.
now.
All
we have a demo app. Yeah. And if you go to our website, and that's the one thing, I did not open up the demo app. Let me open up the demo app. I don't know. I've got so many, we talked about this before. I have so many different tabs open up. But yeah, we have a demo app going now. We're still building everything out. I mean, we're with our dev team, doing all this stuff. Here we go. Log in. I'll tell you. I'll send you. By the way, all the show notes. Your show notes will have all this information.
They'll have all the links. The white paper.
Yeah,
website,
all the links.
Everything. Yeah.
Yep. So we have a demo app going. But now you asked me a future plan. So here's another thing that we're going to do. This is going to, like, again, we're a long-term project, right? So I understand, and all the fighters and competitive athletes that I know, me being one of them for years, is that in jiu-jitsu and just one MMA, but tons of jiu-jitsu, it's boxing, whatever. Most tournaments, unless you do a smoker, like a tournament, you pay to compete, pay to play.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we talked, you're in Seattle. I know pretty much, well, I did. I'm sure I know everybody in Seattle that owns schools too, because all my friends own schools there. All the Gracie Baja guys, I came up with those guys, all those guys that own the schools. Dahlberg's down there. All those guys. I don't know. Shad Lyerly, one of my best friends who actually interviewed on a podcast about that, fought for IFL. And anyway, he knows all the MMA guys. I know most all the Jits guys. I know all of them. But anyway, my point is that there's these tournaments, and I'll tell you, I'm gonna give a shout out to Jeff. Liberty Promotions, I believe, does a really great tournament. And Jeff, I hope you hear this, because I'm hopefully going to be talking to you soon about doing some stuff with you on this specific thing. But my thing is these tournaments, you pay to play. So it's like $50, $100, $150, $200 to compete. And then you have to go through all the competition stuff, which it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Some people, your arms get broken, you get sick. A lot of people throw up. You're tired. You're hungry because the brackets aren't all on time. They're hardly ever on time. Yeah, ever. So here's the thing, FighterCoin, what we're going to do, and we're starting this now. Like, I've got an event here that I'm working on right now. And then we've got an event that we're working on in Puerto Rico. I'm going to be going to Thailand like I said, Vietnam. So I'm going to be going to Thailand to work on an event there. But we're going to be doing events slowly but surely. We're going to build out these events. And what they're FighterCoin events where people can compete. I'm talked right now of doing a couple events here, actually, but people can compete, and we put it online, and they can get tips, money, in the form of FighterCoin. Nice. And we're going to do that across the board. So we're going to switch everything on its head in terms of the tournament, because we don't want competitive athletes to have to pay to compete. We want them to get paid to compete. Yeah. So that's our really grassroots effort, because if you're in the MMA world, you know that if you go to a tournament, a jiu-jitsu tournament, the amount of fighters that compete at that, it's got to be 30 to 40%. They're actively fighting. They're not getting paid, even if they're amateurs, so they can compete, but it keeps them sharp, right? Yeah. Jeff Munson did this all the time. The reason Jeff Munson is just such a total, I don't know if we can cuss on this, but a total awesome fighter, is because, he competed. When I was in Seattle, he was living in Seattle. He competed against my grappling coach. We had a little local tournament. He came in and he competed. He beat him by a takedown, but you want to practice, right? So we're going to involve all these fighters. So if you're a fighter and you're like, hey, man, I'm just trying to stay sharp, so I'm going to do a grappling tournament, no gi, and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to do this FighterCoin one, and then I'm going to get paid to do it rather than paying to do it. Yeah. And then they're going to be involved in our ecosystem, right? The FighterCoin ecosystem. And they're going to be a nominated fighter. They'll fight fans. They'll be like, hey guys, I'm on. And then it just picks up steam and momentum. So we get more and more fighters on board. It's just it's steamrolling process. Mm-hmm. It's a grassroots effort, because we can't compete with the UFC and all these guys that have billions of dollars now, right?
We're going after a different market, like a different segment, especially going more international. Seems like the way to go.
Yeah, well, we're going to compete in terms of when I compete, and we're not a promotion, but I mean, what I'm talking about is kind of promotion. We're not going to put on huge events for MMA, but what we're going to do is we're going to do smaller, like I don't know, 10 matches, maybe 30 or 50 matches of grappling, kickboxing, like I said, combat athletes, combat sambo, in the eastern part of Europe and Russia, of course. That's the goal. So these athletes get a chance to get paid to compete, and we're going to have a section on our app that you can actually go and watch some of the best, and we'll have highlights. So if you're like, hey, I want to, man, I want to see some combat sambo. I want to. I don't get to see it much. Americans don't get to see it much. You're like, yeah, let's see some of the best combat sambo guys. We're going to have the highlights on that, so you could literally on the app go to FighterCoin app and watch this, and you're like, wow, and you're like, man, let's say you have 500 tokens of FighterCoin in your purse, your wallet, and you're like, man, we're going to say, hey, if you like the fighter and the fight, give them a tip, show your appreciation. You're like, hey, I'm going to give that guy 100 tokens. I mean, 20 tokens, whatever. But that's a process. So yeah, I mean, we are going after the bigger names for sure. But I know this game, and this game is very difficult unless we have a high level partner, which we're talking to a few of them right now, which would help us get mass adoption. Which even if we did that mass adoption, we're still going to be doing what I'm talking about now, because we want to get all of the fighters involved, and we want all the fighters to have an opportunity. So let's say if you're a you turn pro and you're like, man, I heard about this FighterCoin thing. Let's say you're in I love South America. I have a passion for it. Love that place. Let's say you're in Argentina and you're like, Buenos Aires, you're there. And you're like, man, I just heard about this. And you like register FighterCoin and you start building your base and you're making $200 your first month. And then after like 6 months, you're making 500 transferred to USD. Obviously it's FighterCoin, but let's say, or the peso, not Bolivian peso, but anyway, whatever the currency they say USD worth, and then you build up your base more, and then you're getting more money you're going to get more money from us, but then you're also going to get more money and tips, and then you compete at a tournament. You're like, hey, I'm going to stay sharp and compete in a tournament, even though I'm a pro. I'm going to do a grappling match, and I'm going to get a bonus $500 from everybody. Yeah. I mean, you can't count on that, but if you have 10,000 fans that nominated you as a fighter, guarantee you're going to make that.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. Yeah. Wow, it sounds like a really awesome project. Was there anything that maybe I should have asked that I missed about this project?
No. Let me look. I'm looking at all of my notes. Yeah, the merchandise, the one-stop shop. That's the one thing that again, this is a twofold project in the sense that we're here. My job is to, as a fighter advocate, is to make sure fighters get paid. Fighters and coaches. That's my thing, right? Primarily fighters, but coaches will definitely get a percentage of they're going to get some definite financial assistance from us. That's my job. Now, I'm also, being a fan myself, I am an advocate for the fans. So I'm going to make sure that the fans have I want that fan connection with their fighter to be more robust, and I want more of a direct connection, and I want them to feel like they're part of the journey. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at Ireland, man. Like, I mean, you go to a Conor fight and look at the fans, right? That they're part of his journey.
Yeah.
Well, imagine if you're that same fighter in Buenos Aires and you have a bunch of fighters. Or excuse me, you've got a bunch of fans, and they're going to follow you, man. But you can message them. You can have hangouts. You can have like whatever. You can have, we've got a whole PR thing that we're going to be talking to them. But I mean, they can have their own Facebook group now that they have a Facebook group or a Google Hangout, and then once a week they just talk to their fans. They're like, hey man, my training, and you just get on there and you're a fan. I mean, that's the goal we want to make. That's the level of, again, intimacy is not a great word in the world of MMA,
but that's exactly what you're going for. Like, that's absolutely. You build that passion. It's not just someone far away. You really feel a direct connection.
Absolutely. 1,000%, Jason. Yes, totally.
Well, it sounds like it's a great project. I'm really excited about it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Jason, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. And I'd love to, you're doing a really good thing. We talked before, to anybody who's listening to this now, just want to give a shout out to Jason, because he's in it for he loves this stuff. It's a cryptocurrency, and I can tell because talking to you, there's a lot of guys in the ICO world, especially the ICO world, and that are just, one-stop shop. Let's get some paid and get out of here. And what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you. So, appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Jason. Take care, bud.
Thanks, Brent, for coming on the show. FighterCoin sounds great. It's going to help so many fighters achieve their dreams, and the connections they're building between fans and fighters is awesome. If you want to know more about FighterCoin, all the links are going to be in the show notes. You've been listening to the Talking Cryptocurrency podcast. My name is Jason Rigden, and I've been your host. Thank you for listening to the show. If you liked it, would you please consider giving us a rating and a review on iTunes? I look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day.